Hey friends, welcome back to the Daily Dose. Thanks for joining me today, you guys. We're on day number 73 today. That means we've got Psalm number 73. We're also looking at the book of Judges, chapters 9 through 12. So, strap on your seatbelt, grab your Bible, and let's get ready to jump in. Go through a quick summary, and we are going to be starting off today looking at the judge Abimelech. So, going into the story about this Abimelech, we had just recently passed from Gideon's story, and it turns out that this Abimelech guy is actually Gideon's son. He had a 3-year rule. We read that he was relatively violent and tyrannical. It appears that this guy was not a good guy by any stretch of the imagination at all. We go on to read that he killed 70 of his brothers. The youngest brother ends up getting away, but I guess this guy was so power hungry that he decided he was going to kill all of his brothers, so not a good dude. We also read that he attacked nearby villages and towns, and when he was attacking one of these towns, he meets his demise by getting a millstone dropped on his head by a woman that was up at the top of this tower. When he gets this millstone dropped on him, I guess it didn't completely kill him all at once. And so he tells his armor bearer, the guy that would kind of carry his armor and be his right-hand man assistant, he tells him, hey, look, I don't want it to be told forever that I got killed by a woman, by somebody dropping a millstone on my head from a tower. That's not a valiant way to go out, right? So I would rather have you kill me. So he tells his armor bearer, basically, hey, cut me with your sword, stab me with your sword, at least let me die an honorable warrior's death, for whatever that's worth. So from there, we move on to read about someone named Tola. Tola, we don't really know a whole lot about. There are 3 main things we know. We know that Tola was from the tribe of Issachar. We know that, that Tola led for 23 years, and we know that he died. But there's not a whole lot recorded about Tola. From there, we go on to Jair, or Jair. We read that Jair was from Gilead, and he led for 22 years. It's also recorded that he had 30 sons, and it specifically says that these 30 sons rode 30 donkeys and controlled 30 towns. I'm not quite sure what the importance is of all of that. I guess that would have been a sign of prestige and a sign of power that he had 30 sons, and all 30 sons had donkeys, and maybe each son ruled over a specific town. I don't know. From there, we read that Israel rebels again, right? So this time, it is the Philistines and the Ammonites that end up subduing Israel. This goes on for 18 years, and then Israel finally repents and cries out to God for help. And then we read that God sends them somebody named Jephthah. It's hard to pronounce, Jephthah. Jephthah was a son of a prostitute. We read that he was a mighty warrior. We also read that he makes a foolish vow, which you'll read about as you go through the text today. He does end up saving Israel. However, he ends up having to sacrifice his daughter due to this foolish vow that he made. So you'll have to dig into today's reading to find out about what that foolish vow was. From there, we go on to read about Ibzan. Again, we don't know a whole lot about this judge. He had 30 sons and 30 daughters, and he ruled for a period of 7 years. From there, we go on to Elon, not to be confused with Elon Musk. Elon is another guy that we really don't know much about at all. Out of all of the judges, this is probably the person that we know the least about. All we really know is that he was from Zebulun, the tribe of Zebulun. We also read about Abdon, right? Abdon has got 40 sons and 30 grandsons who rode 70 donkeys. So again, another kind of a weird reference to donkeys. So he's got 40 sons and 70 grandsons, so that comes out to be 70 of his progeny between sons and grandsons, 70, and they rode 70 donkeys. This guy ended up ruling for 8 years, and that's kind of where our reading for today stops at. So for the point of interest for today, I wanted to touch on something from our passage in Psalm that we've got. So let me just really quick read to you guys chapter 73. We're looking at verses 3, verse 4, and verse 5. It says, and this is David, For I envied the arrogant when I saw the prosperity of the wicked. They have no struggles. Their bodies are healthy and strong. They are free from common human burdens. They are not plagued by human ills. So David is kind of lamenting about the prosperity of the wicked, right? So David is looking around and he's seeing all of these people that are not godly people. They're potentially idolaters and potentially sinners, possibly Canaanites, Philistines, whoever it is that he's looking at. That's kind of what he's describing. He's talking about people who are wicked, people that are not of the Lord, people that do not love the Lord. And he's talking about how they seem to be prospering. They're arrogant. They don't have any major struggles, right? Their bodies are healthy. They're strong. They are not bothered by common human burdens that many of us go through. They're not plagued by human ills. And we can kind of relate to this today, I think, right? Sometimes we can look around and let me make this clear, okay? I am no man's judge. We are no man's judge. We cannot see the heart of a person, right? I cannot look at someone and say, okay, that person is a believer in God or that person is not a believer. I can't see that because it's hard to see belief. But the Bible does tell us ways that we can recognize faith in ourselves and faith in others. If we have true faith, James tells us that should produce some sort of fruit, right? So again, I'm not going to say that I can look at someone and say, oh, that person's not a believer, but look how much they're prospering, right? But again, we can get a clue as to somebody's belief just by the way that they behave, right? So we can see people out in the world who just generally don't seem to be nice people. They seem to be rude. They seem to be arrogant. They don't seem to care about their neighbor or their friends or their family. Just people who go about living life for themselves with zero regard for God. They never mention God. They never thank God. They don't want to be bothered by God, right? Do you guys know any people like that? I definitely know some people like that. And sometimes these people who are, as the Bible would describe it, are wicked, oftentimes they will be living a great life. They'll have a great job. They'll have a lot of money. They'll have a nice house. They'll have a nice car. And all the while, they are not godly people. They may be self-professing non-believers. They may be self-professing people that are agnostic or even atheist. And so what David is saying is, God, there's so many wicked people that are in the world, yet it looks like they've got the upper hand. It looks like they're winning, Why should I bother trying to be righteous and pursue holiness if I can just go the way of the world and accumulate all these wonderful worldly things? And that goes back to the fact that this world is not the end, friends. The end, eternity, comes after the world. And whatever we have in this world, we cannot take with us, right? If you go and buy a Lamborghini, you go buy a Mercedes, I'm not saying anything negative about you if you happen to drive one of those. I'm just saying that if you do have a super fancy car, if you've got a nice house, those things are not going to go with you to the other side of the grave, beloved, right? Those things are not eternal. They're not everlasting. We should pursue eternal joy and eternal rewards, and we should pursue loving one another and doing things that will help people to know Jesus and help people to come to Jesus and help people to ultimately be with Jesus on the other side of what we call this life. So that's all I've got for you guys today, friends. I appreciate you being here. Thanks so much for your time. Thanks for joining me. And until we meet again tomorrow, deuces.